This is the Powered by Rock podcast with your host, Isaac Kuhlman. You're about to discover the most entertaining rock music podcast on the planet, filled with the best stories straight from rock musicians from all over the world. Rock music isn't dead. It's getting better and better. It's time to start paying attention again. With that said, let's get this party started.
The mountain's gonna rise and fall by me.
Hello and welcome to the Powered by Rock podcast, where I'm speaking with Sal Ellington from the Boston-based pop punk band Rebuilder today. Rebuilder has a brand new album called Local Support that came out earlier this year, a month ago or 2 months ago, something like that.
September.
September. So just I've listened to it like 50 times already, so I feel like I've been listening to it for a lot longer. But the new album is high on my list for best albums of 2023, as it's a great mix of pop punk mixed with a bit of heavier stuff, due to the fact that the band has two singers and can kind of jump in between different directions whenever they want. There's even one song on the album that kind of has a start off in a country vibe. Obviously, it's the disco loadout song to bring the mood in different directions, as if you were leaving a concert in a rural bar that you might be playing, hearing the music over the house PA system or something like that. Rebuilder has some serious accolades and credits, such as being on the Clerks 3 soundtrack. I believe that you guys were on that one, right? It was the Clerks 3 soundtrack.
Yeah, Clerks 3. Yep.
Yeah, which is amazing. I love all Kevin Smith movies, so that's awesome. You've also been nominated several times. I think it's 6 times, maybe more now, for Boston's Punk Band of the Year in the annual music awards there. You've also played with some big name acts such as Mighty Mighty Bosstones, Pennywise, Bad Religion, NOFX, and Frank Turner, just to name a few. So I'm really excited today to talk to Sal about Local Support and other things related to Rebuilder, because this is one band and one album I think you need to put in your rotation. So, hey, Sal, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for all those kind words.
Yeah, well,
thanks for having me here.
It's out there on the internet, but there's also some other things I've dug into to hopefully we'll have a good conversation today. But yeah, I'm glad you're here, because it's not often when I find there's a thing about your guys' music that when I listen to it more and more, it gets better and better, which it's not always the case. Like if I listen to Bruno Mars more and more, I hate it more and more, for example. Like, oh, that's a really catchy song. But then I'm like, I can't stand it after like the 15th listening. Your guys' music keeps getting better, because I think you do that and we'll dig more into this, but you got that happy hook or that happy melody over these not so happy lyrics most of the time, right? So the more you dig in, the more you find out about what's really going on. So I want to talk first about some recurring themes in the album, and a lot have to do with kind of mental health issues that you've had over the years, and that you had to deal with, even going back as far as your college days, right? So and through the pandemic even to now. I have to assume that writing this music is pretty cathartic for you. So I'm just curious, like, you've mentioned not wanting to hurt yourself, but also not wanting to be on this earth, which is pretty strong language for, obviously anybody. Like, I don't want to die, I don't want to kill myself, but I don't also want to be in this spot right now. I want to float off and be somewhere else, right? How do you think that these songs, the words that you put out, obviously in a very public space, help you deal with emotions on a daily basis? Or do you think that maybe talking too much kind of actually causes a bit of a rift between you and your emotions?
I think that, I mean, it's definitely a reoccurring theme in a lot of songs, but I always say that, like, with how long it takes for us to put out music, that by the time you've heard said song, whatever was going on in my life was so long ago, like, it's not affecting me anymore, thankfully, but it is, like, I'm not someone that really, like, I don't keep a journal. I know that there's people that like keep journals. I don't really do that. So all I kind of have to like look back and reflect is like these kind of like hurtful memories that like I sometimes will think about, or like when I come to writing a song, I'm like, okay, well, like, what's the song about? And like, I'll start up words and phrases, and I'm like, well, maybe I should think about this time in my life that like I still think about, because it wasn't a very happy time for me. And I'm not very good at writing like fake stories, like there's a lot of people who are like really good at writing, that they can write complete fake stories out of nowhere and tell tales in their songs. I'm not very good at that. I'm like, I have to use like things that I know. So yeah, I mean, it's gone back. I mean, I can think about, being like a kid and just feeling like I never fit in and not really knowing how to like connect with like other kids, like all the way back to like elementary school. It was something where I was talking to me and my brother were talking how like when I was a kid, I remember a teacher putting me next to an Indian kid in class, right? And was like, I'll put you guys next to each other so you guys can talk together. And like, I'm Hispanic. This kid literally couldn't speak English very well at all. I could speak perfect English. I didn't really speak a lot of Spanish in my house growing up because we lived in this country for a really long time. And I remember like the teacher asking us to like have a conversation in front of people and like the kid getting really uncomfortable and like crying and me being like, I don't understand what's going on, Yeah. And then literally every single parent and teacher conference thing after that, they would bring like an interpreter and my mom would be like, why is there an interpreter here? Like things like that, which like, I don't think every kid goes through when they grow up. And like, due to a lot of these things, like I remember like it wasn't until like third grade that like I made friends with someone because everyone thought I didn't speak English. And I was just like, I have no reason to talk. Nobody here thinks I speak English. It's hard for me to make friends and connect, And going all the way to high school, like, I was really into like punk rock and stuff. And I didn't really know a lot of kids into punk rock. And I just like, I luckily found my way to local shows and local punk rock shows where I met people I wanted to be around and I could connect with. And that helped me. And then I saw bands singing to me about like coming from broken homes and dealing with anxiety and dealing with this stuff. And I was like, well, I feel this stuff too, but I haven't really heard anyone sing about it, And now I'm getting more into this like punk rock world of like music that isn't on the radio and being like, there is people singing about this. And it helped me so much that I feel good singing about these things and kind of putting these emotions out there because I really hope that there's someone out there who can listen to this and feel the same way that I did from the records growing up. And that's kind of always been my thing from like day one of like why I wanted to put music out to the world, why I want to like tell these things that happen to me out in the world. I have no problem saying that like, there's times in my life where I felt I didn't want to live anymore because I know that there's other people who feel that same way, but there was a long time where I felt like maybe there isn't other people that feel that same way, and I wish I had more answers as to like what people should do, but I don't, like I'm someone who like went to therapy when things got really, really bad and like enjoyed being in therapy and then like lost my health insurance. And you're just like, well, you just aren't in therapy anymore, and then like going to like, I remember I started seeing like a psychiatrist and then there was like, well, psychiatrists can't see you and like almost like every like 3 months, it was like, well, by the time I see them, I don't need to see one anymore. Like I'm not having a mental breakdown anymore. Like I've figured it out or I didn't and things got really bad. Like it's the way that we deal with it in this country is like so terrible that I don't have any answers for it.
A lot of times you have to pretty much be at the brink of like you're almost about to hurt yourself before they'll even take you to do something.
For sure. And there was times where like I felt so helpless and I was like, I don't know what to do. Do I call a helpline? But are they going to call the police on me? Because I feel like there's like those are such extremes from being like I just want someone to talk to, to being like you have to go to the hospital now, And I remember friends like being like, like I called a thing because like I didn't feel good, and then like an ambulance came to my house, and now I'm in the hospital, and like I didn't feel that bad where I wanted to be at the hospital. I just felt like I felt helpless, you know.
Yeah, and I think they have
And
a
so that's like
policy
a
of like,
scary thing too.
I think even like hospitals, like emergency rooms, have a policy where they have to hold you for like 24 hours before they
Yeah.
release you. So they're obviously just milking that for extra money out of you. When you like, I just don't want to talk to somebody. Like, why can't we just talk?
Right. It's crazy to me. You know.
Yeah.
And you know, like you said, there's like really dark lyrics over like these like happier songs, but that's kind of always been like a thing with me. It's like I never wanted to be the band that's like such a downer, you know, that's like the biggest bummer band. Like,
yeah,
I've seen those bands. I didn't feel better afterwards, you know, like I was like, fuck, you know, and like I never wanted to be that. And that, you know, and especially like in a song like Staying Alive, you know, I was like, well, this song is like really heavy. I have to make sure that at the end of this song, there is some hope of like, you can figure this out, you know? This is why it ends with like, you know, we always find our way home, and it ends like in this like kind of big triumphant place, because I was like, I can't leave this song completely unresolved, you know? It won't, I feel like I would be doing a disservice if I left it so dark all the time and didn't feel like, and I was like, no, for me, it's more like, you know, we get in a room, we play music, we want everyone to have a good time and almost like celebrate that they're still here, you know? And like when I sing these words, it's like, this is how bad things have been for me at times, but I'm still here. So let's just like have fun. We shouldn't be like crying about this right now. But if you want to, that's fine, you know?
Yeah. And that was one thing I noticed. You know, you actually even mentioned it, because my next question was basically like, obviously talking about you changing the mood from obviously the dark lyrics through the music from somber to probably more hopeful. And that's the actual word I wrote on my notes here. So it's interesting to hear you say that, you know, it is, you know, your job or your way of thinking about it is to essentially make people feel hopeful about even sad songs by making the music more hopeful, making the melodies and how you even, you know, build and crescendo, like you do crescendos towards, you know, this big triumphant thing, like you said. So, you know, I think when we're talking about any song, you don't, unless it's like a really good reason, like, hey, your dad dies, you write a sad song about it. Cool. You can put that out there. You're probably not going to have a big, you know, horn section in the middle of that to, you know, inspire people to be hopeful, unless there was some like rift between you that's now kind of been released or something like that. But you know, if it's heavy, like you can let things be heavy. But that's the good thing. Like, I mean, even songs like Hold On and Wedding Day, like you said, Staying Alive, they don't sound dark when you first hear them. So that's why I say when you listen to it 15, 20 times, now you're sitting there listening to the lyrics and you're going, oh, okay, I'm actually starting to hear more and more things about what you're saying, because you know, not all the lyrics are available all the time for albums that are independently released. So you hear it more and more and you're like, okay, now I've actually figured out what's going on. Wedding Day, I think, is a really good example. And that was kind of the song I wanted to speak about next, because as a grown man, this is one of those things that hits harder if you ever had a serious relationship when you were younger, and you know, you pissed it away, you fucked it up, you did something basically to where you didn't keep your shit together long enough to keep this person that was meaningful to you, right? So then obviously the sobering idea is now that that person is now getting married, it can hit you like pretty heavy at that point. So is that song semi-autobiographical, or how much does that relate to you in general?
Semi. I mean, there's like it was like one of those things where I wrote it. I saw like an ex-girlfriend of mine had like said something online or like posted on Instagram, like engagement photos, you know, but it wasn't even a relationship that I like missed being in. And it wasn't even something that I was like, oh, I wish that was me. That was like never the thought. It wasn't even a relationship that I even think lasted very long, but it made me think.
You hear that, lady? Nothing. You meant nothing to Sal.
But like, no, it did make me think about just like, you know, I just kind of like would think about, I was like, damn, that's crazy that this person that I like dated is now getting married, you know, like it just made me like think about it for a second and just feel like that's a kind of a weird feeling, you know, just like that the paths are just so different, you know. And there's people that want to do that. I mean, like, you know, I'm someone very much who like, I don't see what like getting married as like this big accomplishment. Like for me, it's just like people are like, that's such a huge accomplishment. And I'm like, well, I mean, you're just signing a piece of paper and like sharing money now and like spending a lot of money on like a party. Like, how is that an accomplishment? That it's more just like a flex, if anything. Like, it doesn't feel like you accomplished something. But that's just my views, you know. But like, if people want to do that, that's fine. But yeah, so it was just like, you know, when I was like, I'd look at myself and be like, all I've ever wanted to do is just like work on myself and like play music and like really try to like have some sort of musical career, you know, and that's like always on my mind. But, you know, I look at other people and someone I dated and they were like, they're getting married and having kids. Like, that's what they wanted to do with their life, you know? So it's just kind of like more of a reflection song. And there's things I tossed in there too that I don't think people pick up right away, but like, there's like a line that says like, we can sit on top of cars, underneath the stars, something like that. I forget what but like that is straight from Wayne's World. Like that's like the scene where like I was like, oh, I want to throw that in there. Once I threw that in there, I was like, you know, because this song originally didn't have a second verse. And then when we were writing it, we're like, well, it kind of needs a second verse. And I was like, well, I kind of already wrote all the words I want to. So then when I went back to like the second verse, you know, I threw themes of like Say Anything and Back to the Future there. And I was just like thinking about like I love Say Anything. It's like one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
But I was like, you know, I was like, you never really get the sense if you knew if at the end of that movie, like, does Lloyd Dobler stay with that girl? Like, are they together, you know? And I was like, you know, I think I put like, if I could go back in time, I don't think I'd even try. Cause it's like, I don't think I would go back and try to make it happen if it's not going to happen, if someone doesn't want this to happen, you know?
Yeah.
And I just love movies a lot. So I felt like weaving these narratives in and out of like things that happened to me was fun to do. But like, you know, at the end of that song, it gets into more serious topics because it's, you know, I talk about being in an ambulance, like, you know, getting to a hospital in one of those times where I felt like I was having a mental breakdown.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then, you know, being just prescribed medication and be like, well, you're good now, you know?
Yeah. Your brain's fixed. You're good. See you later.
Right. You know?
Yeah, I was going to mention, I mean, there are a lot of adult problems and challenges that this album, you know, tackles, and including the song 100 Days, which is, I believe, written by your bassist, Daniel, talking about being sober.
That song,
so, yeah, I mean, obviously, as you get older, these topics kind of get easier to write about because they're more like in your face, I feel like. Whereas, like, you're a kid, you're like, you're not really thinking about sobriety because you're not really thinking about the effects of alcoholism or drinking in general. Right. You're not thinking about, like, what's the long-term problems here. You're thinking about like, well, if I have a problem, I just go hang out with my friends, drink, or do whatever. Like, you've got a short-term fix for that stuff, right? But like, do you feel like you're you know, these issues are more prevalent in life, or are they just more top of mind when you're writing about them now?
I mean, I think that it becomes more prevalent for sure, especially like, you know, with drinking and alcoholism. You know, I'm someone that I never partook in any of that because like I grew up with like an alcoholic father. Never wanted to. It just never was a thing I was interested in, so I just never did, you know?
Yeah.
But I started touring with bands at a pretty young age, and I remember going out on the road with bands doing merch and seeing these guys partying and doing a lot of drugs, you know? And they were on their 20s. I was like probably in my late teens, and like I remember when those bands hit their 30s, you would see those guys like they were just like, oh yeah, like we don't drink anymore. But then there'd be like the one guy who still does, and like he's a mess, you know. So like, and like it sucks. Like they're like, yeah, I mean that guy's like he can't hold a job. He's all fucked up. He like wishes the band even went away if the band did go away, and if it didn't go away, he's just itching to be back on the road so he can just get back to party life. And the rest of the guys are like, we're not even about that anymore, you know. So I think that like, now that, you know, I see, you know, like Daniel went down that road where he needed to stop drinking because like it was affecting his life. And I'm glad he did, you know, because it's, you know, Daniel's like one of the closest people to me, and we lived together for a really long time, you know, and I was like, I had seen him go down stretches that were very similar to like my dad that I saw growing up, you know, and I think it's important to take your friend aside and be like, you might want to like check this out, because I don't know who's gonna tell you, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that that's something that he wanted for in life, because it's a very difficult thing. But you know, like, I know that Ken Casey of Dropkick Murphys has helped a lot of people get sober, and he's been an AA sponsor to a lot of people, and it's like a substance abuse, helping people with substance abuse is like a big thing to him.
Yeah.
And you know, I've even seen that with some of their band members where they've like not been there for some time because they need to like fix themselves, and then they come back to the band. And seeing that, I've been like, yeah, I mean, this is your family. You have to take care of your family. And a big band doing that, like, you just kind of see that even like now all these smaller bands, like we're all in our 30s and 40s, you see more and more people either just kind of, they're like, yeah, I don't really party like that anymore, or they still do, and it's like, it's just not, it's like not a good scene, you know.
Yeah, especially like in bands where like it's kind of like the theme of being in a band, right? It's like go out, party, do whatever you want. It's like kind of like a I don't know, it's like celebrating the fact that you're able to not have to work, right? So you can go do whatever you want, right? Obviously, most people still go back to day jobs, so when they get back home, it's a whole different experience from when they're out on the road. And yeah, I mean, it's like, I think obviously the older you get, the more you realize that you don't have to do those things, because,
Right.
you know, most of the time in real life, people that are doing this are young people, right? So like you go out, you're hanging out at a bar, and you're now 40, and everybody there that's drinking with you is 24, and you're like, I don't feel like I'm in this place where this is not a good space anymore. I shouldn't be drinking like a 24-year-old now.
Yeah, for sure. And it just, I mean, it gets embarrassing. I mean, there's just like, you know, I remember I had like in a different relationship I was in, like I had a partner that drank a lot, and I was just like, well, this sucks, you know. And then
Well, it is Boston. I mean, you just got to assume everybody there's drunk all the time, right?
I mean, maybe in Southie, but I don't go there, you know. Like, I remember just being like, this sucks, and like them being like, you know, you don't care that your friends drink, and I was like, well, I get to leave them, you know.
Yeah.
Like if they're being terrible, I'll just go home, you know, and just be like, all right, I'm done, you know. But if you're with someone who like is constantly doing that, you can't escape it, and then it starts to really affect you, you know.
For sure.
So
yeah,
but I don't know. I think I see more and more people, like, even like, you know, we're going to fest soon, and I think like as I've seen kind of the fest crowd get older, some people have been like doing like fest sober meetups and things like that, and being like, is there, like, I've seen people posting like the like forums and stuff, and being like, oh, I'm going to this, I'm not someone who drinks, I don't know if there's any other people, and there's like tons of people in other bands being like, yeah, I mean, we don't do that either, you know. Which I think is nice to know, that there's other people that you can hang out with and not have to feel like, oh, there's a thing that divides us, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, you know, I think a lot of people use alcohol as a reason to start talking to somebody, but really the music itself is a reason enough to have like an icebreaker, right? Like, hey, I like your music, you like it, we play music too, like, awesome. So yeah, I think, you know, especially at a place like Fest, where there's going to be people that are there for all the same reason, you're going to have a lot to talk about. So you're not going to feel like any pressures to have to drink if you don't want to.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about more about the new album, because I want to dig into some of the influences, obviously, that you guys have, because I hear hear a few clear. That's a tough one. Influences such as West Coast pop punk bands like Blink-182, maybe even a little MXPX in there, but I also hear some East Coast influence. Stuff like the Bouncing Souls, a little bit of Flatliners, maybe even some of the Menzingers might be in there as well. I don't know if any of these bands. I know that Blink-182 is obviously influential to you guys.
Yeah, that's a huge influence for us.
Yeah,
for sure.
Is there anybody else that you guys are drawing influence from, especially for this particular album?
It's hard to say. I mean, I feel like the Blink influence is always going to be there. Me and Craig are big Blink fans, and you know, it just like it's one of those things like when you listen to a band that has two singers and see how they do things, you just can't help but like rip them off. You know, because you just are like, oh yeah, this is fun. And like,
I mean, even your vocal tone, your specific vocal tone sounds very similar to like Mark Hoppus's vocal tone.
When we did the blank cover sets, that's how we divided it up by who was singing what. He would sing Tom, I would sing Mark's songs. And those cover sets were like easier to do because of that. We're like, oh, cool. I only have to learn half the songs, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's always going to be the Blinken influence. Bouncing Souls is one of my favorite bands growing up. So there, you know, I think that influence is always going to be there, especially because like those are bands that like were able to, especially like the Souls were able to like start writing serious songs, you know?
Yeah.
And I think like my favorite record by them is Anchors Away. And I think it's just because it's like a darker record for them.
Yeah.
And I love that record. But yeah, like things like that have always influenced. Craig does really like that Flatliners record, Dead Language, which I do too. I mean, I think that's their best record, although everyone will argue that with me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think they have a bad album. It's just like, which one do you like most, right? Like they're all pretty good.
I think that's the most like quick, like the songs are like not that long and very like catchy and punchy, and like the record doesn't overstay its welcome.
Sure.
So like I think there's like I always hear like Flatliners influence and stuff that Craig writes for sure. I'm trying to think of like what else.
Going with like Lou Vega, Mambo Number 5 or anything like that. Now, let's talk about, because the song Disco Loadout, obviously, you do have that country kind of twangy guitar in the background.
Yeah.
You're setting a scene and a mood. How'd you guys even come up with that kind of concept?
So that was a song that I came up with. I remember we wrote that probably around the time that we did Mass Turnpike, but it was like too weird and different of a song for it to be like the end of an EP. In my mind, I was like, this is the end of the next record we write. This will be the last song. But I can't, like, it was like one of those things. I think I wrote it while I was probably listening to like a lot of Tom Petty, and like, I think Tom Petty's amazing, but one of the greatest things about Tom Petty is it's like really a lesson in like songwriting, because like some of those songs, it's the same chord progression for the whole entire song. The only thing that's changing is like what you're singing over it and the feel.
Yeah, you could even go your octave up in the vocals to make it sound like it's a different chord progression or something.
For sure. So that's kind of what Disco Loadout is. The whole song is pretty much the same exact chords for the whole entire thing.
Yeah.
You know, and so I wrote that intro, and it was like, you know, it was quieter, and I was like, oh, you know, I don't know if this should be like an acoustic song or what. And I think I brought it to practice, and I was like, yeah. So in the middle here, it'll get like really loud, and it'll be like this punk song. Then we like went on tour during that time, and we tried it live, and it was cool live. But my whole thing is like, if a song isn't on a record, we shouldn't really keep playing it. So like, we kept playing it so we get like, we know the song and the structure and be good at it.
Yeah.
But then like it got taken out of the set list, and then we didn't play it for like years because we hadn't started like recording the record. But when we went in, like I always had a vision of how this would go. I always knew that there would be a lap steel guitar here. I knew that I wanted to put horns at the end. It's a hard thing to try to get your other band members to envision when it's not there. And I was just like, trust me on this. It's going to be like cool. And everyone's like, I don't know, maybe this isn't just like, maybe this just isn't a song that like gets made into a Rebuilder song. And I was like, it will, but like, we just need time to get there, you know? And so, you know, it was like, when we went in to actually record it, it was during COVID, and I think that one was recorded just with me, Daniel, and Brandon. And I remember I went and recorded that, and I was like, okay, well, now that we have the bones of the song recorded, I need to find a lap steel or like a pedal steel player. And I had remembered way back when I did Warped Tour in like, I think it was like 2005 or 2006. There was like a date in, I think it was Minneapolis, where we went to the Triple Rock afterwards because we heard that Drag the River was playing a show, and the Dropkick guys who I was like on tour with, they really liked Drag the River, and they were like, oh, they're actually like playing. We should go to that show. So we all took cabs. We went and saw them play this set, and they were amazing. And it was when they had full band, and Spacey from Casey Spacey from Hot Rod Circuit was in the band at the time, and he was great at pedal steel. This show was probably over 10 years ago. It was so long ago.
Yeah.
And then I found him on Facebook and was like, I don't know if you still play, but I have a song that I need pedal steel. And I saw you play this show back in 05, and you were really good. And like, I don't know if you still do this or even remember that show. And he was like, oh, that was the best show we ever played. Like, I don't know what it was that night, but that's like a legendary show for Drag the River. And he was like, yeah, I can do that for you. I live in Colorado. It'll take me some time, but I'll get to it and send you the files. And he did. It sounded amazing. I loved it. And then, you know, I think I kind of benefited by like people not being on tour and being home, because like, I'm friends with JR from Less Than Jake. And I knew, because he lives in Connecticut and Chris Rhodes from the Bosstones lives in Connecticut, and they see each other often. I was like, hey man, can you like, would you do this horn part for me and get Chris on it too? He's like, oh yeah, I'll get him to do it. I see him like, we'll take care of it. And then they just sent me the file, and then like we put it together, and it was like, okay, this is what I wanted the song to be. I wanted it to be this, you know. And I like that I got to call it Disco Loadout. It wasn't originally called that. We always just called it Down. All the songs have had like other working titles, and then when it's time to make the record, we're like, it needs a title that's not Down. You know, like there's already so many songs called that. And
yeah,
I think I was like thinking about it, and I was like, well, it just, you know, for how it feels being the end of the record, like it feels to me like the end of a show, you know?
Yeah.
And I think there's that song, I think it's Jackson Brown, called The Loadout, that I always thought was interesting. It's just talking about how like, you know, everything's coming off the stage and all the stagehands are pushing it out of the room. And I always thought that song was cool because of that. So I felt it would be a cool thing to call it Disco Loadout because it's the end of the record. It feels like the end of the show. But I don't know if, are you aware of what a disco loadout is?
I don't know what the term means. No, I know what loadout obviously means, but I don't know what disco loadout means.
It's like probably the most fucking disrespectful thing ever, I think. But what a disco loadout is, and I knew that all my industry friends would get it. And the second they saw the name of that, they were like, that's amazing that you called that song that. But essentially what it is it happens here at a venue called the Royale a lot because they're owned by a nightclub, but you can have a show that's sold out, and that show is made to go on early, and the band has to be done by like 10:30 because at 11 they're getting a DJ in there.
Yeah.
And you know, like they're changing over for DJ night. They don't give a shit that you have a show here with tons of people who paid to be here. Yeah. And then they're like
probably would stay and drink more if they were allowed to.
Stay and drink more if they were allowed to, you know. And then they're gonna take a merch cut that night, but they're like rushing out people from buying merch. They're telling you that you need to pack up and get the hell out of there. They're like, you can go count your merch in the hallway because we need this area to open up. Gotcha. Then you kind of get all your stuff out and you get it in the hallway, and you have this little room, and then they open up for club night, and there's like fucking 15 people in there for like the DJ, because like no one's showing up to that thing till like midnight anyway, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
And then like they're like, yep, you got to clear out the green rooms. Nope, there's no time to take a shower. You got to get out of here, you know? And I've seen it happens on shows where you're like, oh my God, there's so many people here. This show is sold out, and they could care the fuck less, you know? That's what a disco loadout is. It's like, sometimes we'd always like when I did work there, sometimes I'd see the show times. I'd be like, oh, is it disco loadout tonight? They're like, yep, sucks. So they're like,
That's
it's
crazy.
cool, we'll be done super early, but like dealing with that shit at the end of the night, it's like terrible.
Yeah, it kind of like I'm thinking of it now. Like I should just at the end of the album, you should just hear like a doop, 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 like club music playing right at the end and fade out. So obviously, the last thing I want to talk about this album is the fact that you guys had pretty much a shitstorm that you had to deal with. Obviously, trying to get it put out, the whirlwind that became of it with AF Records and all the stuff that fell out from that, but basically, for those who don't know, who are living under a rock, but Justin Sane from Anti-Flag and the band Anti-Flag had AF Records. That obviously all disbanded as soon as some sexual allegations came out. What was going on in your mind, and how did you get Iodine Records into the mix so quickly? Because this was just an absolute shit time for you guys specifically.
Yeah, I mean, it sucked a lot, but it like, it sucks for a lot of multiple reasons, because like I think that people have they probably in their minds imagine how record labels work and how this industry works, and it's so far different from what it is. That when I saw everything come out, my first thought when I saw that was, I was like, this is so bad for so many people, but I was like, this sucks for their crew.
Yep.
Who are, some of those people are good friends of mine. This sucks for, the victim involved, who had to like go through this and now it has to talk about this publicly. And I was
even
like,
the other band members. I mean,
the other band members too. Completely.
I mean, seriously, if they have no idea, like maybe they're kind of being naive about it, but what somebody does in a bedroom is totally different than what somebody does in public, right?
It's one of those things where like a lot, I've had people say to me before, they're like, how did they not know? And it's just like, it's one of those things, like I can see why you would think that. However, I can tell you I've been on a lot of tours with a lot of bands, and it's just like, like especially when a band's that big and there's a crew who does like everything for you, the band members don't need to be there until sound check, and those band members might not even see each other until that time, and sometimes they skip sound check, and so like what time you have to be on that stage, so he knew what time he had to be on that stage, and when he got off, all those other band members are now doing the things that they know that they have to do when they come off stage, and everyone starts setting their own routine, and like those guys are older, they all have families, so like I wouldn't be surprised if like some of those guys' routine when they got off stage every time was like, well, I'm gonna call my wife or my girlfriend and check in on my family, make sure they're good, do all the things that they're doing that pertains to them. I don't think any of those people are like, I want to go see what Justin's after show routine is. Like no one's thinking about that, and the crew is busy now taking everything down. By the time you are like, where's Justin? It's like, it's if bus call is happening.
Next day or something when you're leaving.
Yeah. I mean, like, if the bus calls, sometimes like the bus calls like 3 a.m., sometimes it's 5 a.m. I mean, if I'm getting on the bus, like if I go out, like my routine afterwards when I'm done, like I'm the merch guy, so like by the time I'm finished, no one's in the venue anymore. And so I'm like, okay, do I shower tonight? Do I shower tomorrow? Depending on what time it is, I'm like, if it's 4-1 or before midnight, I'm trying to find food instantly, because I didn't get a chance to eat. Everyone else did. I didn't get a chance to eat. So then I get food, and then I get on the bus. I'm not going to check who's in their bunk. I'm just getting in my bunk, I'm getting in my bunk. And I think that is probably the routine for everyone. If I saw a band member talking to a girl at a show or a woman at a show, I don't think I would say to myself like, well, I should go check and see if they're of age, or any of that stuff. Again, like I'm concerned with what I'm doing after the show. I'm not looking into anyone else's thing. So I think
99% of the world isn't going around snooping in other people's business most of the time, right?
So I think that, when these guys are saying that they had no idea, I mean, I believe it, just because like there's just so much happening after the shows. No one's trying to see what someone else team's doing. They're just all trying to get into their routine. So, you know, these are the things I thought about right away. I didn't think about my record because, again, you know, we dealt with Chris Stowe at AF, and Chris Stowe, you know, is not someone who is in Anti-Flag. He doesn't tour with Anti-Flag. He runs the label. I knew that, like, for me, it was like Anti-Flag has nothing to do with this label except for the fact that I think they help fund it to start it, you know, and they'll use that label as their own thing to release their own stuff. But like, no one in Anti-Flag is like packaging records and shipping them out,
or
you know,
day to day helping with stuff there.
Right, you know, and that's Chris's job. So you know, maybe it was just naive of me, but like I didn't even think about our record or the label at all until somebody said to me later on that day, they were like, what's that mean for your record? And I was like, oh, I guess it does affect it because it is their label. I mean, I've talked to those guys like twice, like the members of Anti-Flag, like ever. I never even talked to them during when we were like signing to AF or like whatever that it looks like. And I remember like I did try for other labels, you know. I tried for I wanted to see if like Pure Noise wanted to put out this record because like we have friends on Pure Noise, and for me, I was like, I will try always to be on a label that has a team of people that work there, and is, regardless if they like your music or not, it is their job every day to make sure that record gets bigger and to work for your band, you know. And I know people over at Pure Noise, and I, you know, they're friends of mine, because I was like, if we can get that, that'd be good. I tried, but I don't think we're a band that like has sold enough records for them to like want to take a chance. Maybe, I don't know. They weren't interested in it. And, you know, I mean, I sent it over to like Epitaph and Fat, but like, I was like, I mean, I'm never going to get a response from them either, but you got to send it just cause like, you got to send it, you know, like, if for some reason I got a call from Brett Gorowitz, I was like, I like your record. It'd be like, oh shit, that's sick, you know? But like, I don't know. You just always have to try. So I sent it over to them, and, you know, I didn't hear anything back from those. Stowe had told me right off the bat that they would be interested in putting it out. Other like labels, Asbestos and Say 10, were interested too, and all those record labels were great, but they're all just like one-man operations, you know. And I was like, we've done the one-man operation before. It would be nice if it was someone that this was their full-time thing, but if that's not around, then I'm probably going to go with whoever can give us kind of like what makes sense, you know. Like AF, we already had friends that were on AF, and it seemed like they had a really good presence at Fest. And I was like, and talking to Dead Bars and Spanish Love Songs, who were also on AF, they were like, yeah, I mean, it gives your band a bit of a bump for sure in terms of like that crowd base. So it's not a bad thing, but like it's not life changing. And I knew that, you know, and I was like, I actually wanted 6131 to put it out. Joey, who runs that label, runs Wanna Hear It Records right up the street where I live in Watertown. And that was like in my head, I was like, that would be great if Joey wants to put out the record, because, you know, I see him on like a weekly basis, and like we go to his store and we support his store, and it's like, if we need to help package things together, he's right down the street. But he was like, we're not really running that label anymore. So then that's why, like, I was like, okay, fine, we'll go with AF. Like, Stowe's a good guy. They're not going to give us like any money. Like, I don't think that's like a thing that happens too often anymore. Where like,
there's no advances for people these days. Right?
Which is like, I mean, I thankfully am in a spot where I don't need that. You know, I was like, I'm an adult and I have like a good job. So like, I don't need an advance of $5,000 to make a record. Like, it had already been paid for the recording. I already paid for it, or like we paid for it out of like our band funds. You know, like we wanted PR, and AF didn't want to cover the PR team that we wanted because it was too expensive for them. So we paid for that too. So they just only paid for the pressing of the record. And I was hoping that, you know, they would do some promo on their end. And that was like, it was like such like such a little thing to me that like when everything happened, I didn't really even think about it that much. And then when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is going to really fuck this record.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, well, this sucks all around, but for our record, I remember like trying to even just talk to like AF and be like, what's happening? Because like Stowe and Massey, who like ran the label, are like great people. And I was like, if they want to like turn this label into something else and rename it, I'll stay with them because they're good people. They didn't do anything wrong. But they weren't interested in doing that. And it was just kind of like, we're just going to give you your records. You owe nothing for the record, which is, I think, awesome. But at the same time, I would have gladly paid my share to not have to deal with that shitstorm that we had to deal with.
Yeah.
And they're just like, cool, you're just getting your records. And goodbye. You know, it was just like, it was that. It was like, you're getting your records, have a nice life. You know, and like asking for anything and needing help for anything was just like almost non-existent, you know, or I just felt like I was like, it's like, I know that those guys, and I know Christo is dealing with a lot because his whole entire life has just been turned upside down. And now I have to ask about like, can I get my like Spotify pre-save link? Guy's not going to give a fuck about giving me that, you know, like, and like, nor should he, but like, I got to ask someone for it. It's the only person I can go to. And now I look like a dickhead asking for these things when I'm just trying to like take care of my record, even though I know what they're dealing with a lot. So you know, I was like, I don't really know what to do about this. I was like, I guess the easiest thing to do is just order stickers to go over the jackets and the actual record and ship it out that way on our own thing and change the pre-order link to be on our Bandcamp so people can start ordering directly through us. And you know that we did that, but it was quickly after that like Casey from Iodine wanted to have a conversation about the record, which I knew Iodine was like, I didn't know if they were interested before. Like we never had a conversation. I was kind of already talking to AF and I was like, I mean, if Iodine wants to talk about it, I can. Like we can talk, but I don't know what will change. And so then when Casey was like, hey, you know, we saw what happened with the record, he was like, you know, we want to put this out, but like maybe we should delay this till next year. And I was like, well, that's not happening. I was like, here's the thing. This is what the record is. It's coming out in 2 weeks. We have a record release. And after that, we have a tour where we're opening for Frank Turner and Streetlight Manifesto. And that wasn't announced yet. And I was like, we're playing some of the biggest shows we will ever play as a band. We will sell records at those shows. If I'm putting out a record with like a sticker over it, that's what it is. Unless you have any other ideas. And I was like, and you know, and someone at the actual record plant hit me up and was like, hey, we're about to like press these records, but like, is anything changing with them? Because we saw everything that's happening. And I was like, can you take the AF logo off? And they're like, yeah, I think there are like 40 of them already got pressed and then we stopped it. I was like, great. Well, send those 40 to AF so they can fulfill some of the pre-order and I'll send a sticker to go over the logo. And then, the rest of them, can you just take off the AF Records logo? And they're like, sure. So when Casey heard that, he was like, oh, so like what needs to be redone? I was like, well, the insert never had an AF Records logo. And I skipped doing a thank you section on this record because we didn't do it on the last one because we ran out of space. And I was just like, I mean, I guess who needs the thank you? So we just didn't do it. And I was like, so there's no mention of AF on the insert. So the insert's fine. It's just the jackets. So Casey was like, man, we can get jackets made for you within time for your record release and your tour. And I was like, awesome. So they got on it immediately. Like the next day, Casey was like, we have the artwork. We're ordering the jackets. We're going to make sure that they're at your house in time for the record release. And, you know, he's like, we can have them sent to Death Wish, who does the distribution. But them together, and I was like, I mean, I'll just put it together. I was just like, just send it to me at the house. I'll stay up super late. Stay up to like 4 a.m. anyway. Like, I'll just sit there and just put everything together, you know. And I did, and I think in the end it was maybe like a box of 50 left. I was like, okay, they can do this 50. I'm too busy. I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
But you know, like the rest of them we put together, and it was great. Like, you know, it was really like they stepped up and really wanted this record to come out and be a part of it, and I could see that they cared about it, and I loved that. And so I'm happy that we end up going with Iodine, and Joey at Want to Hear are like really good friends, so they were like, yeah, I think that's a great fit. Jay Moss, who recorded our record, is in Love Letter, and their record's coming out on Iodine, you know. So it was like, okay, cool, like we're not as hard as some of the bands on here, but I think that's probably fine, you know. Like,
yeah,
and they're Boston, they were Boston based, so like, you know, for me it was like, okay, cool, it fits with us being this whole local support record
for sure. Yeah, and that makes, I didn't even think about that, but yeah, it ties everything together in the end. Well, that's great. I mean, you know, like I said, it was literally like right as that was happening, and then I think I even messaged Iodine Records and was talking to him about like, hey, you know, it's awesome that you're able to kind of jump in and help bands that are like getting screwed over by this whole deal. And obviously AF Records just said, we're shutting down. Like, they didn't even like plan anything. They just said, it's all done. I was like, damn, like you're shutting businesses down now.
And you know, and I understand, like, you know, in talking to Stowe, we, you know, had hard conversations where he was just like, dude, he's like, you understand, like, this is all I did for my life was run this label, like, you know, and has a wife and kids. So it was like a huge blow to him that this thing would be completely gone now, as well as, you know, Massey, who was AF's merch guy, and, you know, Mark Code, who's been like tour managing and being like their manager for years now. Yeah, and all those guys, all of a sudden they're just like, you know, it's gone. And I understand that they were just like, I don't know if there was any contingency plans or anything. And you know, it, like I said, like it sucked for all the bands that were on AF or had stuff in the works with AF for sure. That's nothing compared to what those guys have to deal with. And I completely understood that. And, you know, I defended those guys to the end, being like, you know, those guys didn't deserve that to happen to them. But at the same time, I also had to like ask about my record and being like, well, what's happening with us? Because this is the thing I've worked the longest of, you know, like this record's taken so long to come out. I felt like we took so much time with it, for better or for worse, but like, you know, I'm happy with it. And I was like, well, now this thing's just going to have like this like tainted like stain on it. Like that sucks, you know, like it's not even gonna get a fighting chance. Yeah.
Well, the good news is every time I listen to it, I don't think about AF Records at all. So that's a good thing.
I mean, the good thing is that like, it's almost like it never was ever going to happen on AF at this point, which is good. I don't think people even think about it, so it's fine.
Yeah. And I definitely want people to hear at least one of the songs on this album. So we're going to take a quick break, but I'd love to play the new single, Hold On, during this break. So I have to ask if I have your full permission to play this song so fans can get a taste of the music.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. So we're going to play the brand new single from Rebuilder called Hold On, and we'll be back right after this to bring Sal into the spotlight with some hot seat questions. That should be a lot of fun. Stick around. We'll be back right after this.
Waking, feeling awful. I keep waking, feeling awful. can't talk tonight. Hold on, we're going too fast. We can't go back. We can't go back. I said, hold on to the one thing you have. We can't go back. We can't go back
Thank you for calling Rebuilder Boston. If this is a local support emergency, please hang up and find your nearest artist. Otherwise, leave a message.
Welcome back to the Powered by Rock podcast. I'm here with Sal from Boston punk band Rebuilder. Hey, Sal, are you ready to be put in the spotlight?
Let's hear it.
All right. So in the last segment, we talked obviously about a controversial band issue. I'm going to bring it right up on the first issue here as well. The first question of the spotlight. As a band based out of Boston and somebody who's played with the Mighty Mighty Bosstones before, how do you land, or where do you land on the dissolution of the Mighty Mighty Bosstones? And what I mean by this is, I'm not sure how much of a rumor it is or not, but they allegedly disbanded over Dickie Barrett's views on the COVID vaccine. And he's anti-vaccine and such like that. Do you feel this is a strong reason to essentially dissolve a band full of friends, especially longtime friends like them?
This is a hard one for me to answer because I don't know if you're aware that I worked for the band for a very long time.
Okay, I did not know that, but that's even makes it even more difficult for you. It's really hot seat questions, man.
I love that band a lot and all the people in it. And, you know, in the conversations I've had with, you know, various people in the band, I think it's, you know, it's sad to see because like they've been friends since they were children.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that one of the reasons why they always kept the band going, even though they didn't do much, but you know, even one of the reasons why I toured them, touring conditions with that band wasn't like luxurious in any way. You know, a lot of tours I did, I was like literally sleeping in like the back lounge in the closet because they're not a band that can afford 2 buses. So, you know,
Yeah.
have 1 bus and we'd have a shitty bus. And I still always did it and made it work because I was like, I love being a part of this crew. The crew is great. Everyone in the band is great. So I will always try to be here, you know. And I think even for the band members, it was the same. It's like, well, they get to see each other. They get to at least do the holiday stuff, be together, put out records, and maybe they're not touring year round anymore, but it's still this like band that's together on a group of friendship.
Yeah.
And I don't think this band dissolved over someone wanting to be vaccinated or not. That's not why this band dissolved. This band dissolved because because the thing is like personally, I think if we're in the middle of a pandemic and you see like literally people in other countries begging for a vaccine that they can't even have, for us as Americans to just like be like, I'm not fucking taking that. It's just like, all right, I think it's a fucking selfish ass view, you know, and that's just my preference. But the thing is, like, we live in a country you can make your decision whether you want to take it or not, you know. But I think that when people in the band saw that like Dickie was now being on like, you know,
protests and stuff like that,
protest and talk shows and stuff, like it's no longer you just being like, well, I'm just making my choice not to do it. You're like, you're trying to become part of a movement. And I think what started to get challenged was the idea of, you know, it's like, well, this band's based on like looking out for your fellow brother and sister, you know?
Yeah.
And like,
I mean, I would say they were kind of progressive in a lot of ways too, which is weird that like
sure.
the COVID vaccine made it seem like that Dickie is now very conservative and anti-vaccination and stuff like that. So
the thing is, he was always really anti-Trump though, and he still is. You know, he's not a Trump supporter for sure, and that's what's the thing is like it would have been easier if he was that guy. If he was that guy, I'd be like, well, he's just like a crazy right wing guy. Like, you know, it's like okay,
he's just some old white guy now. It's fine.
Old white guy, crazy white wing guy, but he's not. And that's the thing is that, you know, he's not. He's very caring. You know, he was someone that like, you know, from the beginning in any band I ever was in, he would always like try to help us out and was like always very supportive, you know, would like send me pictures of himself wearing like a Rebuilder t-shirt, you know, and always checking in and saying hi. And it seemed like that stuff had like stopped. And it's, you know, and like, I don't know what happened to his life during COVID, but he stopped being on the Kimmel show and he moved to Arizona and seemed like his life was on a different agenda. And I don't think that agenda aligned with the rest of the band members in a way that was like, we can keep going as a band and ignore this, because like, I think it started to be where like fans of the band started messaging and being like, what is this about? Like, why is your singer, you know, aligning with someone who's making like fucked up Holocaust, you know? And like, how do you answer that, you know? Because like, you're gonna be like, well, we just have different views. It's like, well, that's crazy. Like that's insane to back someone who like is saying these things like nationally, you know, with like RFK Jr. and whatever. So it's just like, it's, you know, I think that like, do I think that the band will never play together again? I don't know if I would rule that out, you know, but I think that like, it's definitely made kind of like a line in the sand for some of those guys to be like,
sure.
I don't think that I can like, you know, get behind Dick and like promote what he's doing, because like, how do you promote him and be like, yeah, he's my best friend, he's the singer of my band, ignore everything else. Sometimes you just can't ignore it.
Yeah. I mean, COVID ruined a lot of close relationships with friends and everything like that, family members even. So like, you know, I live in Las Vegas, but a bunch of my family lives in the Midwest, Montana, North Dakota, and those people think a lot differently than people in Las Vegas. So you know, you have a light conversation about politics before is now all of a sudden, you know, everybody's screaming at each other by the end of it. And you're like, why? Like, why are you getting so worked up about it? Nothing's changed. You just got way more misinformation all of a sudden. And now you think you're more right about something that we both agreed on is fucked up to begin with. So yeah.
I mean, dude, when all that stuff happened, like I remember getting a call from Rolling Stone magazine, you know, like someone from Rolling Stone like called me and they're like, we heard that you work for the band and that you might have information. And I was like, I don't have any information. And they're like, you know, like, and I think we all did no comment. Like nobody everyone that got contacted in the band was like, I'm not talking to you. Everyone in the crew that got contacted was like, if this is like a story to like reflect on the good times of the Bosstones, I'm in. But if this is to like trash Dickie, then I'm not in, you know? And I was in the same boat. I was like, regardless of how I feel about it, this would hurt the other guys in the band, and I'm not interested in doing that. Those guys are some of the most amazing people I've ever met. But I remember him asking, being like, did Dickie ever mention, or anyone in the band mention vaccines in the past? Do you remember? And I was like, why would anyone mention that? And like,
what point in history is that ever going to come up?
Like, well, that would never come up. Like, and if it ever came up, I don't think I would stick around the room to like discuss it. If it was just like, I don't believe in vaccines, I don't think I would say anything. I think I would just be like, well, I'm going back to the merch table. I hope you guys have a good show. Like, you know, like,
well, I don't really want to get sick around this person because they might die.
I'd just be like, well, that's a wild take, but okay, cool. You know, like, and like, I'm not a fucking scientist, so I don't have anything to like try to change your mind. that you can do that work yourself. That's why we have scientists. If a scientist is wondering how do merch cuts work in a venue, he's he can ask me.
Yeah.
So like, yeah. So I mean, that's I think it's sad. I think it's sad because like they were a band that I think meant a lot to a lot of people. I think they still do. But
that last album I thought was really good too. I was like, this is one of their best albums, and then they just like canceled everything. I was like, what the fuck? Just crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I would have loved to see them keep going and making more albums. But I think that, I think when you kind of inadvertently make your band members like have to stand for something that they don't really stand with, then I think it might just be too weird, because I know that, they did some shows, outdoor shows during COVID where they did Riot Fest and some other stuff. And I wasn't on those because they were just like outdoor, and they didn't need like a merch seller for those. So I didn't do those last shows that they did. But yeah, I mean, those were shows that I think even you had to be vaccinated to do them. And they had to, or like, I think they probably had to disclose to venues that like some of their members weren't vaccinated. And
they're not going to wear masks, and they're not going to listen to what you say.
But I think they did. That's the thing is like, I think they did wear masks where they had to, and did follow parameters. It wasn't like this giant, like, I'm not going to like listen to your rules type thing. And I think that's what made things weird, was that like, in person they would do these things and it was fine. It was just like, okay, these are people's choices. This isn't a big deal. And then you would start seeing things online popping up that you're like, oh, this is a bigger thing that I now can't ignore. It's bigger than just being like someone's choosing to not do something. It became bigger than that,
Yeah, fair enough. Well, that's enough about the Mighty Mighty Bosstones, but let's go to question number 2, because we've only got number 1 out of the way so far.
Sure. I talk too much. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all good. It's all good. I mean, there's probably tons of people who don't know half the story of what's going on. So it seemed like a perfect guest to ask, and you know way more than I expected you to know. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So number 2 on the questions is, in all your playing days, what venue, city, or band have you not played with that you would still strive to make happen at some point?
The band that I always wanted to play with, and I don't think it'll happen, because I don't even think they're a band anymore. It was like I always wanted to play with Against Me. Against Me is a huge influence for like all of us in the band.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the one band that like all of us are like, oh yeah, that band is amazing. And I think those early Against Me days really helped me in like wanting to make a band and like, kind of like making, like, I think Eternal Cowboy is like one of my favorite records, and it's like such a short record, and it's like, wow, you can do a lot in a small amount of time.
20 minutes, you can get 12 songs in there.
So good. It's just so good. And and then the records keep getting smarter after that, I think, for a while. And I don't know, I just always really like that band. But and the bass player Andrew is like one of the nicest dudes. The reason why Daniel plays in the middle every time is because during that era of the band, Andrew played in the middle, and he always looked like the coolest guy in the room. Daniel always wants to be in the middle for that reason, like literally that reason. And then like I met those guys when they had done like Against Me had done some dates with like Dropkick, and they were all like super nice. But I remember during that time in my old band submitting to try to like open for them, and I never heard anything back. And then in the time where Rebuilder has been a band, trying to do shows with them and never getting a response ever, to the point where I was just like, I don't think that we're their vibe. It was like I was like, I don't think that they are about what I'm about. Maybe, there's things I've seen things where like there's like I think Laura Jane Grace has written some amazing songs, but there's times I've seen things on Twitter being like asking things to like the internet about like merch and stuff like that, things that I'm very qualified to answer, and like even being like, does anyone have like a Square thing I can borrow? And I was like, oh yeah, I have all that. If you message me, I can give you all this. And just like it's just like I've never gotten a response. I'm just like, I
Yeah.
don't think that person likes me very much, but you know, it's like nothing I can do about that. But I've always loved their music a lot.
Nice. Very cool.
That
So,
and Aerosmith is the other one I wanted to open for.
well, that would be huge.
There was like a little bit where like I think they were doing some show and it seemed like they were going to add a band, and I was like, maybe we can be that band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be
It's
awesome.
like the only two. I think that
Even if nobody in the venue is like, I'm here for Aerosmith, they don't show up until like 20 minutes before they show up. You're like, we still open for Aerosmith.
it's still open for Aerosmith. Fucked Up too. That's another band, but
Oh, good.
me
good
and
band.
me and Daniel love Fucked Up a lot. But I don't think we would ever open for them because like they have such heavy ties to like Boston hardcore.
Yeah.
That whenever they play here, it's always like a band that's on like Triple B or something like that.
Yeah. And I think that they're from Canada, right? So, like
Yeah,
Toronto.
Toronto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that band is, if one band's going to let loose and like you're going to have a great time watching a show, it's going to be Fucked Up for sure.
Menzingers too. We've never opened for Menzingers, and I always thought that would be a good pairing.
Nice. Yeah. I think so too. I think with like the lyrics and the way you guys put songs together, I think it's a great compliment.
I just don't know how no one's looked at that band and our band and been like, dude, there's a lefty guitar player in both bands. They stand in the same spot. This is like a match made in heaven. One guy brings string, there'll be another one ready to go.
Yeah. I was going to ask you a question about being left-handed, but I'm left-handed for some things, but I play guitar and do most things right-handed. So I didn't want to call you like, you know, how do you play guitar with the handicap of being left-handed?
Too.
Was that?
I mean, it sucks. It sucks. Like I'm ambidextrous as well. Like I write with my left hand. I play guitar with my left hand. I play drums regular. I grew up playing drums. I didn't grow up playing guitar.
Gotcha.
And I never played that lefty. What sucks is like when I was a kid, like trying to play sports, which I was never very good at. But like I remember a coach being like, "What hand do you throw with?" And I was like, "My right hand." And they're like, "What hand do you catch with?" I was like, "My right hand." And like, you know, they're like, "No, you have to catch with your left." And I was like, "But I rather catch with my right." You know, like yeah. So everything's all fucked up. Even like skateboarding, I skate like
goofy.
No, not even goofy. Mongo.
Okay.
It's like makes no sense. Like my friend Jay makes fun of me. He's like, "You can't skate that way, man. It's embarrassing." I was like, "It is the only way that feels really natural is that way." And I was like, and like, I'm not good at skateboarding. I was like, yeah, I also don't need to be good at skateboarding. I'm like almost 40.
Yeah. The only way I stand on a skateboard is if it's totally still, and if it start moving, then I'm falling off of it. So
Yeah. It's kind of hard.
yeah. All right, let's go to number 3. What is something about the Boston music scene that you are most grateful for, and what do you wish would happen to make it even better?
I'm grateful that there's just, you know, there's great bands here. You know, I think that whenever you see people that kind of shit on this music scene, it tells me right off the bat, I was like, man, you've never toured. Because like we've done tours where we've just played in cities where they're like, damn, they don't really have anything here. They just don't, you know, even like we just did Columbia, Missouri with Frank Turner. And it was like an okay show. It wasn't like super packed, but that was one where I was like, I hit up like local like band message boards on Facebook groups and being like, does anyone have 2 guitar caps that we can borrow? And a drum set. That's what we needed. 2 guitar caps and a drum set. And there was like barely anybody to help. You know, like there wasn't any bands out there. I was like, we'll pay. It's just really expensive to like rent gear from an actual place. I'd rather give it. Yeah,
he's going to upcharge that by about 6 times or so.
Yeah, it's like $600, you know. And I was just like, I'll give a drummer $100 to bring me a drum kit, you know, just like you're not even having to play, you know. And just, luckily, we got to borrow the opening band's kit that they added, but at the time there wasn't an opening band, so some guy, you know, a really nice guy, dropped off 2 guitar cabs for us, but he had to. Took him like 2. He was like, I'm 2 hours away, but I'll still do it. I paid him like $125 to come do it, and I was like, so thankful that guy did. But like in Boston, if you did that, you'd find so many bands available. They're
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, we practice right down the street. We'll bring it over. It was crazy to me that like in these other places, I couldn't find anyone. And I was just like, I mean, that's how a lot of scenes are. There just isn't
Yeah.
a scene in places. So I think we have some of the best bands ever. Unfortunately, it's hard for these bands to break out to like a national level. You rarely see it. But I do think that we have some of the best bands. I think we have really cool venues. I think, having promoters that care, like, I'll always say that Ryan Agate, who booked O'Brien's, is like one of the reasons why we have any music scene here, because like he was friends with so many punk bands and was able to get them to come down here, and they trusted him to book it. And that's why O'Brien's was like the place to play. And when he stopped booking there, I was bummed that he wasn't going to do anything anymore. And then he started doing the same thing at Faces, and now there's a new place to play, because he's done that. And there's, Cody Rico and like Ian I Design, Daniel who in my band used to book Charlie's in Hong Kong. Those things aren't a thing anymore, but like when he did, it was such a great thing to have. I think the thing that sucks about it here is I think that there is things in this city that are allowed to get away without contributing. And I think it really sucks, because I don't know how the city of Boston allows for so many music venues to just go away and practice spaces to just go away. And it comes down to where, like, if you want your city's music scene to strive, it's a matter of like who owns the real estate.
Yeah.
Like they can't stop someone who owns a venue from selling the venue. But like, when Great Scott got sold, and like O'Brien's, I think, has been sold, is because the guy died. Like, he's like an old guy. He passed away. And that's what's making up the determination, or like the people that sold the practice facility that's now becoming a science lab. Like, how come that's not just becoming a bigger, more efficient practice space? How do you have Berklee School of Music right down the street, which considers themselves one of the most important contributions to music? How does Berklee not own a bunch of venues or a bunch of buildings in this city that are just rehearsal spaces that they can still make profit on, but is available for the community to use as, and put plaques all over them, be like, this is here because of Berklee School of Music. Great. Sure. Who cares? But having that there, but instead they just get to be like this music school that like makes a lot of money, and they literally do nothing for like the community here at all. I mean, I went there, and I remember when I was there, I was like, there was even like something like only like 15 rooms for drummers to play. And they had like over 200 drummers.
I was going to say, this is a school of music, so like there's going to be a high concentration. Yeah.
I remember I started using the lefty kit when all the right-handed kits were too booked up. There was one guy that was lefty, and I was like, if the lefty kid comes by, let me know. I'll switch out. And I would just like use that just to kind of like build my left hand a little bit more. But it was like, I was like, it boggles my mind. And even like something like Northeastern has a good music program. They have a music venue in their at their college that like they book like punk bands and stuff like that, and it's only for students to go, or you can go if you're a friend of a student. And it's like, okay, cool, but it's like, well, how come they don't like have buildings as well that are just for the community, just to contribute, just be like, we're in your city, we take up a big real estate. So that's just my feeling on it, especially when we're in a time where like, like our practice space that we use sucks. I hate our practice space, and it's so expensive, and it used to be awesome. It used to be great. And then like, like, I don't know the guy who owns our building. I have no fucking clue, but he sold it, moved it, and now it's not as cool. We have less room, or we're paying more money. Like, I don't understand how that works. And there's no other place for me to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, okay, cool, you know, but I don't know. And like the thing is, it's not even just a modern thing. Like, this is the city that had Jay Giles band, had Aerosmith, that had Boston. All these ginormous bands came out of here. How from the get-go did you not preserve that and be like,
Yeah.
these amazing bands came through here? This is a place for music, you know, like Nashville's like, oh, this is the home of country music. How wasn't Boston the home of rock music? Because so many huge acts came out of here.
Yeah.
You know, there should
Especially
be
American-based rock bands. I mean, there's not many other cities where that many big rock bands of American-based music. I mean, you got, London, Liverpool, like some other, outside, even like Sydney, Australia, where like some big bands from those countries have come out. But you're like, where in America? There's only like three. It's like Boston, LA, just because of, yeah.
You have LA, New York, and and those are the big ones. But like Detroit was like very much like happy to be like, yeah, we're Detroit Rock City. Like that is who we are. We are a home of music. We have the Stooges, we had MC5. Like they had these things and they were happy to like champion that, And I mean, I don't live in Detroit, so I don't know what it's like to like have a practice space or venues there. But like whenever we've played there, it's been great. And I have seen tons of venues there, and it seems like I don't know if they have a problem with practice spaces either. But it's just seeing it in Boston. It's like there's no evidence that any of this ever even existed here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. So let's go into question number 4. This one's a lot lighter, less heavy kind of conversation, I think, on this one, because I like to always ask a random food question. For me, I've never actually been to Boston. It's one of the cities that I actually want to go to at some point. But what food staple of Boston are you most fond of? Talking baked beans, lobster rolls, Boston cream pie, clam chowder, Fenway Frank, something else. What thing in Boston are you like, this is my favorite thing to eat, and we're known for it?
None of them.
Yeah.
I
don't like seafood.
I mean, I don't really fuck with lobster rolls. I think they're gross because when you look at lobsters, they have poop on them, and so I think it's weird to then eat them afterwards. I do like clam chowder. I think that's probably the best thing. That's like a very Boston thing. Is like a Boston clam chowder. And I love a good clam chowder. I think that's probably my favorite thing. But one of the things that we have here that I think is like so good is we have a place called Anna's Taqueria here, and it's my favorite burrito. And Toby from Red Scare, whenever he comes to Boston, he has it, and he's like, this is the closest thing to like a San Francisco Mission style burrito, and that's why he always eats it. And when I was in San Francisco this like past month, I got a Mission burrito, and I was like, damn, this is so good. And he's right. It like Honest Taqueria comes so close to this. So I always, that's my favorite thing to eat here in Boston is Honest Taqueria. There's only 2 locations, I think, here in it. No, there's a bunch, but they're all like Boston based. They're all around, But yeah, I don't eat any of the Fenway Franks, so I couldn't fucking comment on that. We have good pizza places, but like, we don't have anything compared to like New Haven, Connecticut. I think has the best pizza by far, hands down, out of any place. Maybe like the Boston cream pie, like Boston cream pie is delicious. Wherever you go, you're going to get that. And that's always going to be awesome.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. Now, last question in the hot seat. What 4 musicians would you put on your personal Mount Rushmore for either being influential or being your favorite? So they can be any musician of any skill level, or like of, skill type. So bass player, it could be 4 bass players, 4 guitar players, 4 singer-songwriters, whatever you want.
Huh. It's interesting. I mean, I think I would put like Joe Strummer of The Clash on there.
Okay.
I think I would put probably like Angelo from Fishbone is like one of my, was hugely influential to me growing up. I think I would like think I'd put like Debbie Harry on there. I mean, I'm wearing the shirt, but like
Yeah,
I always
blondie.
felt like Debbie Harry brought like that style that like you can have style and be in punk rock. You know, you don't
Yeah.
have to look like shit.
You don't have to look like you just crawl out of bed, put on the same shit you've been wearing a whole week.
Yeah. And then like, you know, Ian MacKaye, you gotta give it to him.
Yeah, Minor Threat and oh my god, Fugazi.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm like, why can't I think of the goddamn band from Washington D.C.? But yeah.
I mean, I definitely got more into Fugazi than I did Minor Threat, and I still, whenever I put on Fugazi, me and Jay Moss will always text him and be like, dude, it's crazy how good these records still are. It's like it's incredible.
I was actually talking to American Television. They're from Washington D.C. In preparing for that, interview. I had no idea that Minor Threat, like Ian MacKaye, was actually in Minor Threat and Fugazi. I just like didn't know that. I just thought he was only. I was like, well, that's funny because I've listened to both. Never even looked at like the credits to see who was singing it or seen them live, obviously. But I was just like, that's hilarious that all this time I've just never put that together.
That's so funny. Yeah. Well, I guess the other big influence that I guess would always be on my Mount Rushmore. It's crazy because I didn't even talk about it at all on this podcast. But like anything John Reese has done is a huge influence on me.
Okay.
Rocket from the Crypt's one of my favorite bands, and I have definitely pulled from Rocket Records, Hot Snakes Records, things like that is a huge influence. But like, anything John Reese is like really, really big with me.
Very cool. Well, that's all I got. That was the hot seat. That was a lot of fun getting some deeper insight into various topics, things that I didn't even know we were going to talk about, but it was awesome. So Spotlight is off. We'll come back in a few moments to stick a fork in this interview with some exciting news about what Sal and Rebuilder have coming up for the rest of the year and coming up in the near future. So stick around. We'll be right back with the Power Bar Podcast. Running your own music career is incredibly difficult. Trying to get people to like, share, comment, listen, follow, it's all just overwhelming. Most musicians give up before they ever achieve success, and that's the worst. If you're looking for a better way to grow your music career, head to DIYrockcareer.com for some absolutely free training. It costs you nothing, and it could be the difference between hitting your goals and quitting your dream. Go to DIYrockcareer.com today by clicking the link below this episode.
Then I lost my way.
All right, welcome back to the Power by Rock podcast. Let's talk about what Rebuilder has coming up on the horizon. I know you guys just did some shows with Frank Turner, a show with Streetlight Manifesto, and some other shows as well, obviously. But do you have any immediate plans for more shows? I think you guys are playing Fest this year, right?
Yeah, so we're playing Fest next week. We have that, and then we haven't announced it yet, but we are doing the last two Streetlight Manifesto shows for the year, which one is at Roadrunner in Brighton, which is going to be awesome because I also work there, and Starland. There's the Starland show in New Jersey we're also going to do. There's going to be one more show before the end of the year too that is going to be like a 10-year celebration of Rebuilder, because this is our 10 year of being a band.
Nice.
But we haven't announced that yet, but we have the Streetlight shows first.
Very cool. I mean, Starland Ballroom is huge. Like, I mean, that's like a kind of a major punk band East Coast venue that a lot of people want to play. So it's very cool.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like being able to kind of play those stages when we wouldn't be able to on our own is very cool. Very happy for the opportunity to do that. We did the San Fran and LA show with Streetlight, and I mean, we were playing those stages being like, I don't know if this will ever happen again. This is crazy. This is awesome. But yeah, so we got that. Oh, and then in February next year, we're doing that Kevin Smith cruise.
Oh, nice. All of his. I saw that and I forgot about that until just now when you mentioned it, because I saw that like when they announced it, and then it obviously sold out. But I'm like, that's pretty cool. Like, you get to be on a cruise for all like the View Askew, whatever, View of Screws or whatever it's called. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah. I mean, that's pretty cool. As somebody who grew up watching tons of his movies, it's the first thing I think I ever saw of you guys when I started kind of paying attention to your music was that you were now being announced on the Clerks 3 soundtrack. And I was like, that's pretty awesome. Like, I would love to like just be in a room with Kevin Smith for like a day and just be like, well, hey man,
I still haven't met him. I do want to like be like, I will. Hopefully he's not too swamped that I can like just be like, why did you choose this song? Because I still don't know. I went to one of his Q&As, but like the people bombarded that mic afterwards, and I was like, oh, I'll just go home now, but yeah, I mean, it's very cool, especially like, I mean, me and Brandon, our drummer, grew up watching Kevin Smith movies, and I think I even had said like, I feel like Kevin Smith movies were so crucial in my development of growing up and being funny, and knowing like humor and like knowing how to deliver things, and like I just, Mallrats was the first one I watched, and I watched Clerks, and I remember Chasing Amy coming out, and I loved all of them. And then, I remember Dogma coming out, thinking it was genius. So, and I used to listen to his podcast for a really long time. So it was very, very cool that, we got our song in the movie. Craig and Daniel are younger than me and Brandon by around like 6 years or so. And it's completely lost on them. They have never seen any of the movies at all. They're just like, they saw Clerks 3 and they're like, I didn't get it. And I was like, well,
this is too meta for me.
Weird movie to see when you don't know anything,
Yeah, everything is self-referential. Like there's a whole universe where all these movies exist together and they all know each other. Yet half the actors are doing most of the other actors, like all the other characters. So but yeah, the one thing about Kevin Smith and his movies is it feels very much like he's handpicking the soundtracks, because when he goes back later and talks about like bands that he liked, for like Mallrats soundtrack, which was one of my favorite soundtracks growing up. I remember going to the cafeteria the weekend after I watched, and this is like in junior high when I watched Mallrats, and telling people about this movie. They're like, no way, you didn't watch that. I was like, hell yeah, I did. You should come with me. We'll go this weekend. So then like I was bringing like 5 and 10 more kids each weekend. I ended up watching that like 4 or 5 times in the theaters, because like everybody wanted to go see that movie. But then the soundtrack itself was just full of really good songs.
That soundtrack's amazing. I love that soundtrack.
So that like when he's putting out a movie, I don't think he's the one that's like just like, oh, you go figure out the soundtrack for it. I guarantee you he's hand selecting those, because he's the one that edits, directs a lot of that stuff. And to have beyond that thing, that just shows that Kevin Smith probably knows who you guys are and is happy about what you're doing.
I hope so.
Yeah. But yeah, you should go. They'll probably have a Q&A on the cruise, and you just go walk up to him and be like, hey, Kevin, why did you pick my band song to be on Clerks 3?
I mean, that's what I was trying to do the last time I went.
Who are you?
Yeah. And be like, what? Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, that's great. I mean, obviously, the show's coming up. The album Local Support that you guys put out last month, still, obviously you have, I think, two music videos and maybe a lyric video from memory. I think there's a total of 3 singles released.
Yeah, there's a 4th coming out for Disco Loadout very shortly.
Nice. So keep an eye out for that. Obviously, I'm going to put some notes in the show notes below this to like get the links to your music and all that stuff. But do you have any other things that you want to shout out, or anything that you wanted to plug before we go today?
No, I think that's great. I mean, if you want to follow any of our socials, everything is always Rebuilder Boston. We don't have very many TikTok followers, so if you want to follow us there, I don't know. That's what the kids are doing.
Yeah. Sal's going to start doing dances to his own songs. You'll see it.
I already did that.
Yeah.
That was the thing I did during COVID, being very bored, was learning TikTok dances, and on my personal page, and it blew up my personal page for a small period of time. And it was very strange.
Yeah, it's odd. So I have one more question before we go, and this is something I always ask every guest: is before we leave, suggest one new music, a piece of music, an album, a new artist, something like that you would recommend people check out. This could be this year, last 365 days, but what you consider new, essentially.
Let's see. Well, the last the Broke Downs record that came out this year was one of my favorites. Okay. And our song Broke Downs is literally called after the band, because the riff that I had written, Craig was like, it sounds very Broke Downs to me, and so we kind of always called it like the Broke Down song. And then I wrote the lyrics, and I was like, well, this all fits with the theme, so we left it that. But it is because of that band. I forget what the name of the last record that they made.
Well, I'll put the link to it anyway, so that way people can find it. But the link will be in the show notes below. Go check out the Broke Downs record. But that's all I got for you, Sal. I appreciate you spending this amount of time with us. You know, this was one of my favorite interviews just because you have an entirely deep connection with the scene in Boston and a lot of bands there that I have absolutely no real connection with Boston because I've never been there. I don't know anybody really from there. I know of a lot of people from there, and I feel like I know a lot of bands, and I feel like I know the bands because I've listened to them so much, but I don't know any of them.
Yeah.
So it was a credit to Rob from Wiretap Records, Rob Castellan, that he said you should check out Rebuilder, and that's when I did, like, I don't want to say like a year ago now, and I was like, sure. Cool, and been hugely like loving everything that you guys have done, past and present. So it's been a lot of fun talking to you today.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So again, thank you so much, Sam from Rebuilder, for being on the show today. Go check out the show notes below this episode to get the links to the music and social media from Rebuilder. And remember, the Powered by Rock podcast is powered by our listeners. To show us some support, please be sure to subscribe and share the podcast on social media. You can also make a donation to the podcast if you'd like to help keep us making awesome episodes with awesome guests. You can see the full video interview on YouTube as well as Spotify now as well. If you want to check out some of our awesome content or our merch and gear, head to poweredbyrock.com to see what's good there. That's our show for today. I'll see you soon for the next episode. Until then, rock on.
Supposed to be easy.